Hi, this is Adam Sandman from Inflectra, and in today's webinar, we're going to be talking about advanced JavaScript techniques using our Rapise test automation system. In today's webinar, we'll first be looking at how to use the JavaScript debugger to set breakpoints, to watch variables, and step over and into functions and code during execution. After that, we'll be looking at the built-in code completion and Intellisense system that lets Rapise show you the available methods and properties of objects. In addition, we'll be showing how you can extend this to add support for both native JavaScript objects, but also external libraries and functions to make things easier for coding. After that, we'll then be looking at how to launch other applications using Rapise. First of all, launching a simple set of command line and batch applications. Then we'll look into some more advanced examples where we're actually going to be invoking ActiveX objects and .NET objects. So that way you can actually open up an application and automate it. For example, opening up an Excel sheet and a workbook. So I presume everyone's familiar with the basics. If I go into Rapise, and I just need to start with something. So let me go ahead and create a new test. And I'm going to save it locally. So just give me a sec. Well, it's going to try and connect to Spirity, which we haven't used today, so it'll take a minute or two. And for today, I'm going to use this library information system. So I'm going to log in and just do some create some basic scripts so we have some objects to play with. So there we go. I'll create locally, and it'll be sample.js test 1 and web cross browser. I'm going to use Chrome because it works best on WebEx. Okay. JavaScript. And one thing I'll mention right off the bat, because we had some questions about this in another demo I did, was that there's an option in JavaScript and in the RVL option to not include comments in the recording. And that can be really useful. So sometimes the comments tend to obscure the actual what's going on in the code. And so there's this options generate comments setting, and if you set that to false, it doesn't generate the comments. So some people like the comments because it explains what the code does, but in some cases, if you're just clicking on stuff and doing things, the comments look a lot like the code and they just get in the way. And so one trick we found that can make the code more compact is to turn off that comments. So first of all, I will show you what the recording looks like with that. So let's go ahead. There's our application. I'm going to go into record and bring up Chrome, and I'm going to log in. I'll log in as librarian. This is just the basic login script we've done before. Oh, except I mistyped it. So let me do that again. And I want to get rid of my erroneous. Actually, I'll do it in the JavaScript after this. Okay. Go into book management. And let's say we want to create a book, Adam's book, hit insert, and now we want to verify the book. So I'll just do a Control-1, verify that, text, okay, log out, and finish. So that's good. Oh, let me pause that phone. Okay, and basically that's your standard recording. And if you notice, it created the standard set of JavaScript operations, but you don't have those green comments between them. So some people like that because it makes the test just a bit more compact. And we've done this before where you can actually play through this. But one of the things I want to do, which I think we've done before also, is parameterize it. So what we'll do, we want to take a block of this and make it into a function that we're going to call. So we'll go into the login section, and first I want to get rid of the bit that I did that was the wrong login and password. I don't need to record that, so get rid of that. So this section here is logging in, setting a username, setting a password, and clicking a submit button. So let's do that. And actually I didn't verify I logged in correctly, I skipped that part. So I'm going to go and just do that one last piece that I forgot to do. So just to remind you, if you need to ever record something, you don't have to do the whole thing. You can just go back and record the one missing bit, which was the assertion. So verify, Control and 1. I want to do inner text, okay, finish. That's good. So there's my assertion. I'll just put that in the right place, which is after you log in. So this whole section is our login sequence. I'm going to select it, right click, extract user scenario, and we'll call that login, like that. That creates a function called login over here, and we're going to make that parameterized, so we'll call it username and password. And we'll replace our text with that and with that. And also we do want to verify it, so I also want to replace that hard-coded. So we've now taken our hard-coded text and made it a function. The only thing we need to do left is go back here and create a login, which would be librarian, comma, librarian. So that means we're now logging in with a set of parameterized values. And just to make sure this works, I log out, hit the play button, and make sure it does its thing. Now, one of the things we can do if this test didn't work, for example, is we might want to actually investigate why something didn't work. Maybe the login and password isn't being sent. And this can be very useful, for example, if you're calling this test case from SpiroTest or from an external command and you're sending in the parameters. You want to make sure, is the value of username and password what you expected? And you can do a couple of things. So let's say before we actually do the test, we want to store it in a variable. So JavaScript lets you have access to variables. So you can go in here and you can do a variable found name equals SES librarian get text, like that, hit semicolon, and do found name, like that. And then what that lets us do is put a breakpoint right here. So a breakpoint will let us stop the execution. I can put it right here by clicking on the gray section. And I change my debugging mode from no debugging to run with the internal debugger. And then what I'll do is I'll hit the play button. I need to make sure I've logged out. Yep. Hit the play button. It's going to run through in the same way, but it is going to stop now at that point right here. And I can first of all to mouse over either the names, like username is librarian, password is librarian, and the found name is also librarian. So that's good. And so we could, if this didn't match, we could find out where the problem is. Maybe we're sending the wrong value in. Now we also have in the variables section, as well as using the tooltips, there's a way which is good to look at, but if you wanted to cut and paste from it, it's more tricky. We do have in the variables section a way to look at all the functions. So I can either look at the main test, which is your main test here. Any local variables, which there aren't any, would be here, so there's none. Or you can expand the login function, and you'll see all the variables, both the parameters that are put in, and anything defined locally in that block. You can see it right here. You can then more easily access it. Now there's also an option to watch, and watch lets you type things in and watch them in real time. So I could go in here and type in username. I can go in here and type password, and I can go in here and type found name, and I'll just continue the debugger and hit run. It's going to finish the test. That's good. Now if I was actually to do playback again, and I go to Rapise, you can go to the watch section, and you actually see as it gets there, it actually fills it out. So you can watch in real time what's going on. And it's really handy because if something didn't match what you expected, you can just type in what you're looking for, and it puts the value right here. The other nice thing is if it's something complex like an XPath, you could actually then cut and paste it. So for example, let's say we were to do a bit more investigating and go down here, and we want to find out what the XPath is of that particular element. I'll stop my debugger, and I'm going to go into my test. Sorry, wrong one, functions. And let's say we went to this SES librarian. We could do something like var XPath equals SES librarian dot get XPath. There it is. And we could even do, I think we have a CSS one. Let me double check. I'm not sure if we do. Let's see. I think we only do XPath, not CSS. Yeah, I'll double check. We get the class name. Could be interesting. I don't know what's in there. Let's see. That'll be the CSS class itself. So we hit play, just log out and stop. Hit play again, and now it's going to run the debugger this time, and we can now look at some more variables. So you've got the ability to look at what's going on. Okay, CSS is empty, but there's the XPath, and we could go back into our watch. We could even type it in here and say XPath, and that way you can cut and paste it and put it somewhere else that you want to verify or do something with. The other thing you could do is go into the variables view, and you can see the global code. That's going to show you all the executing information. There's a lot of diagnostics in here, and you need to really look through this and see what you're interested in. But it will show you things that are going on in real time, like the list of libraries that are loaded. You can look at the current object, the cached objects, the browser profile, things like that. So if you want to do some diagnostic logging, you can also look at these, and anything with the 3 dots and the curly bracket is an object that you can expand and drill down to find more information. Some of this stuff is useful, some of this may not be so much. It's all but it's everything within Rapise's running engine is accessible. And so, for example, you might want to look at the entry point to see which function do we call. You might want to come in here and look at the libraries that are loaded. You can look at anything else that's being running in real time, the log file name, the locator that's being used, metadata file. So there's lots of configuration stuff. So anything you want to see in the middle of the test, you can, when you hit a breakpoint, you can go in real time and actually see what's going on. Similarly, you can look at the objects too and get the properties and put those out into XPath. Any questions about the debugger?
No.
Okay, and so it's really the same information. You can either look at it here, type it in the watch, or use a tooltip. There's pros and cons. Obviously, the tooltip can be quick, the watch lets you get the text, and the variables lets you see kind of everything going on. You can also use an external debugger, such as Visual Studio, but for generally speaking, it's easiest just to use the built-in debugger that comes with it. And when you're normally recording and playing, just turn it off, otherwise it will try and debug during recording, which can be a little weird, because it'll actually let you debug inside Rapise itself. And so let's just stop what we're doing, hit the stop. So that's good. Now, so another useful thing in JavaScript, if we go back to our user function, is can we help our people who are using it get hints on what's available? Because one of the things is, if you use a object like SES login, if I type it correctly, and I do period, I get Intellisense, I get a list of all the available functions and methods, and that's really useful. If I was to take something like the username, though, I'm going to get a much more restricted set of operations, or nothing, depending on what the object is. So one thing Rapise can do is it can let you can let it hint what the type is of a particular object. So because JavaScript's a typeless language, that's one of the challenges of JavaScript, is that it's a typeless language. So username isn't defined at compile time, like in, say, C#. It's just purely a object that can be anything you want it to be at runtime. And that's really great because it means you haven't got to declare things quite as prescriptively as, say, C# or Java. The downside is that when you're writing tests, if I don't know what this is, if I'm writing this function, I don't necessarily know offhand what it is. And also, someone who's calling the function, they may not know what to pass in. In this case, login and password is pretty explanatory, but let's say it was user ID. Is that the email address? Is it the ID that's numeric? What actually is that? It might depend, of course. And so you can actually, in your code, use hints to actually document what the type is. And we actually have a KB article on this. Let me just grab it. So Rapise, JavaScript, types. Here we go. And this is an article, it's KB 281, and that shows you what you can do with the built-in things. Now, what you can also do is add some additional typing, and we do it using a series of comments using this syntax. And so for things like ActiveX objects, which we're going to get to shortly, you can add the typing, but there's also ways you can just use the syntax in general with the slash and the stars to tell something what type it is. So what that could be is, for example, if I remember correctly, it would be star like this, and it would be, I think it's number. I get mixed up in JavaScript. Actually, no, it would be string, not number. Let me save it. And now you'll see we now have Intellisense, and it knows it's a string. And I can see all of the JavaScript functions that are available for acting on a string, like substring, and there's documentation. Because especially because JavaScript is a little bit wonky, because it has some historical functions that are duplicative. For example, substring and substr. And both do the same thing slightly differently. One comes from the old Netscape Navigator, one comes from the old IE4 days. And so JavaScript has some funky language constructs where you've got some historical compatibility, so there are different functions. And it's really easy to get substr and substring mixed up. One is the start and the length, one is the start and the end, and that's subtly different and can cause lots of problems if you don't remember that. And similarly, the search can have the replace rather can either be a string or a regex, and it behaves differently. If it's a string, it replaces only once. If it's a regex, it replaces multiple times. And again, these are things that if you haven't used JavaScript for a while, it's easy to forget. So the Intellisense is a really useful feature, and you can use that on various different types. So if I was to do, for example, var I, like that, that's an integer. I dot, it doesn't know what it is. If I do var I equals 0, same thing, and then save it. Oops, let me hit save. And that's important. You should always do save. It automatically can type based on assignment. So I don't need to necessarily put this slash star star string if I'm going to do it in an assignment. Rapise is smart enough to see, oh, I'm assigning it a number, therefore it's a number. Put in some values. Similarly, if I turn that into var I equals quote quote, hit save. And it's really important you hit save. Until you hit save, it won't update the IntelliSense file. You'll now see it's a string again. So that's really useful. You can either do an assignment, or if you're not going to use it, say it's a parameter, and you're not going to assign it, you then use this alternate syntax here to basically hint what the item is. And obviously, password is not a number. I'm just illustrating that that's how you do it. So that can be really useful. The other thing that can be useful for, and actually, I guess I'll leave these as strings since it doesn't hurt, is you can also use that when you're doing object selections in Rapise. But before I go on, any questions on that? Does that make sense?
No, Mr. Khan, this almost makes JavaScript like you're taking that into a strong type language.
Right, now see, the interesting thing is this was provided in Rapise about 2 or 3 years ago. The irony is that finally there are languages like CoffeeScript and TypeScript which are now providing this natively, and they use slightly different syntax. But Rapise predates that, so we have our own slightly different syntax. But we do try and make things as typed as possible. And there's other examples of that. That's just 2 simple examples. The KB I think has more. And I think I've actually seen there's some more stuff as well. For example, when we get into that, you'll see you can even use, we'll get into this more, other wrappers for more complex objects. Like when we do an Excel application, you can insert type libraries and things too. So we'll get back to that. But that certainly is one of the things that's quite useful in Rapise. Let's go back in. The other one I know is very useful is typically using it to get a Rapise HTML object. So for example, when I interact with SES, let's say login, I put period, I get my IntelliSense. Now let's say that's obviously easy for that one, but let me go back into my application, and I'm going to go in and record the grid, just the table of books. So I'll log in, go to books, and I'm going to go hit a record, and I'm going to use the spy tool. Hit spy, and I'm going to go track. I'm going to go get the grid. So to do that, I do Control T, and then I want to find the table. So I'm going to click on the table, and I'm going to hit learn. And you see here I've learned the table. And I can double click on it to make sure I'm getting what I expected. Yeah, that's right. hit finish, finish. Good. I'll go back into here and I'm going to create a new function and I'm going to call it function. Oh, actually, I'm in the wrong file. I want to be in the functions file. So let me just change myself over to here. And I'm going to manually write a scenario called find book. I'll worry about the parameters later. And I can do SES. And if I go in here, I should see my book, main content grid books. I could change the name of that if I want. Now, if I do something like period on this, I will see all the functions. That's very nice. Let's say I want to find a row. So I go in this and I go do DOM query, XPath, like that. And that lets me find a book by XPath. And I'm going to do this from memory. I want to get a row and I want to get a row with a table cell where the text equals something like atonement. Okay, that will get me something back, so I'll put books. I'll do that. And I'll put a breakpoint right here. I need to call this from my script. And I don't really want to log in right now, so I'm going to comment this out. And I'm actually going to comment all this out so I don't have it run all this stuff I don't need. And I'm just going to call find books. That will find the book. Right now it's just going to find a book. I'm not parameterizing it anyway. Hit play. Oh, I forgot to do debugger. It's going to run it. Don't worry about that. If you get in a situation, it's going to pass. Probably will fail, but it's going to pass. But I need to actually debug it. So just change it to debug, internal debugger on, hit play again, and this time will stop. Perfect. And I go to the debugger, and I want to step over this, not into the function. So I go step over, and I can then go back into Rapise, and I can do books. And I can go into watch, and I can type in here books. And I can go in here. Oh, actually, yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, you can't do that with the watch. Is only for simple values. The variables is better for the complex ones because you can do this. So I see that it's a book of length 1, which is what I expect. It's 0, and there is my object. So I've got this object. It's basically a HTML object, which is the cell, and it's called this stuff. So that's very good. So I've got a books array, and that's good. So I start my debugger, go back into my test. So this is a common need if you have some functionality that you want to actually call from somewhere else outside of Rapise. Now there's several different ways of doing it. So I'm just going to go back into my main test, and let's say, I mean, again, some of this you may have seen before, so do let me know. But let's say you want to first of all run a file. So let's go in. Let's say we want to run an executable. A common need would be I've got a test application that I actually want to launch, particularly for a desktop app rather than for a web app like this one. So let me go and just create a new test. Create locally, and we'll call it simple desktop test. And we'll do, yep, that's fine. JavaScript, yep, that's good. And what we want to do is we want to, let's say, run an application. So I go to my file system, and I'm going to go to documents. I'm going to go to my Rapise tests, and this is my sample desktop test. It's this one here. So I need a little application to run. So let's just say I'm going to go to my samples folder, which if you install Rapise, it's basically in the documents and the libraries, public documents, and samples. So Rapise, samples, and there's a simple little app called ToDialogs, which is right here. So I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put that inside my new test, which is under documents, which I think I closed, Rapise tests, and sample list tests right here. So I'll put that in there, and I want to run this. I can click on it, and it does that. So it'd be nice to launch this, so I can go in, and the simplest thing to do is go into Rapise first of all, and just add a reference. So add file, and I want to change it from script files to all files. This is actually a different folder, so let me go to the right folder first of all. It's got a similar name, but it's actually not the same one. That's better. Do all files, and then grab my app. And there's my app. And if I drag this across, it actually adds code to launch it like that. So the simplest thing is global do launch. That runs in exe. If I hit play, it pops up the app. So that's quite useful. And if you actually record a test and say launch the application, it does that automatically. Now, there's some more functions that go along with that. So if I go into my user guide, into my objects actually, and go to global, do launch. Now it does that. You do have some optional parameters, so you can pass a command line and working directory, and you can attach if it exists. So that's good. And you can attach to the window. So there's some advanced functions there. Now the other thing you can do is, you say I wanted to get rid of the application at the end because I want to clean it. So I can also, it does return a value, so it returns the PID. And if I'm going to be good about typing, I could even do this, like that. So I'm just going to do PID equals plus PID. So that will give me the Windows process ID. So hit play, hopefully anyway. And there you go. And so now I know the process ID. I would like to get rid of it because at the end I want to clean up my application. So I'll go and go global dot do kill by PID. You can do it by name too, by process name. The only danger there is if you've got multiple things with the same name, like iExplore or Firefox, you might kill the wrong one, especially if you've got different browser tabs open and things. So the PID is usually a bit more reliable. So we'll put that in. And so that we can have a little bit of time, I'm going to put a wait do sleep. I'll sleep for like 3 seconds, just so we can actually see it happen. Hit play. It's going to bring up the app. 1, 2, 3, and it's gone. So that's a simple case there where we wanted to launch an app, and in reality we'd have all our test scripts and stuff here. At the end we do a cleanup and get rid of it. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, good. And then the other thing you can do is, and this is a bit more advanced, is you might want to interact with an ActiveX application. So you might have some functionality that you want to interact with and programmatically do things to. And you can do this obviously in other languages like C# or VB.NET, but you can do it directly from Rapise. And what you do is, because really Rapise runs using the Windows scripting host, so it has access to all the things on the machine. So what you can do, if I just go in to my samples, just get the syntax correct. Hold on. Documents, all public document samples. That's a good one. Or actually, this is an even better one, using MS Excel. Well, this is an example of using it with an Excel application. So as you know, we do have the spreadsheet option. The spreadsheet built-in object is good for reading data out of a spreadsheet. It pulls data out and it gives you functions for reading test data. But sometimes you want to do more than that. And so what you can actually do, and this is just an example, it could be any application, is you can actually launch any application that's installed on your machine that exposes an ActiveX handle. And things like Office, it tends to be Excel application, Word application. And so you can actually automate a natively running application on the machine, like that. So what we would do, for example, is do this. Go back to our other test. So if you wanted to launch something, obviously if you launch it through the command line, like the two dialogues, that launches it in a separate process. You have no ability to activate with it, interact with it. If you launch something this way, it does give you the ability to actually interact with it and call functions on it and automate it. So it depends what your need is. If you just want to launch something, then obviously the do launch is the simplest. Otherwise, you do have access to the Excel app option. And anything in the ActiveX registry can be, or .NET runtime can be run here. And then if you go back to our examples, we did actually have an example here of doing the exact same thing, where you want to do some type safety, so you can actually see what's going on, like this. And so what you do, if you want to actually get help, because if I do Excel app, I don't get any help, I can go in here and do import type library. It's now checking the Windows registry of my machine, so it may take a little bit of time. And you can go in here, and everything that you want to access, you can go right here If I have Excel, I should do. Excel, I believe that's the right one. Let me just go back and make sure I'm, yep, that's it. Hit import. Okay. Like that. So that's really powerful. So anything on your machine, you now have run real-time Intellisense on. So it's not just things in JavaScript, it's not just things in Rapise, it's also anything on Windows on the machine that you want to interact with. So if you wanted to automate Outlook, launch an email, you could even do that. The calculator, obviously you're not testing the app. So to be really careful is, this is automating the app, but it's not testing it. So anything you do here, like for example, if I open up Excel and do some activity, I'm just unit testing it. I'm not really doing any UI testing. So it's really good to do things like setup or prepare, but remember, don't confuse this with testing. I'm not actually testing the user interface in any way whatsoever. But it is useful if I wanted to like open a test Excel sheet. And in the case of Excel, the main benefit we have is we want to write to Excel. You can't do that using our spreadsheet object. But you can using this. This gives you the full power of Excel to write to a cell and update things and generate files, and you can pretty much do anything you want on the machine as long as the app is installed locally. Does that make sense? And so you get the benefit of code completion, and you get the benefit of actually having Excel. So for example, I could try and open up a file. In fact, I should probably just check my example to find out what the actual command is. Oh, okay, workbook's open. Fine. Yep.
Can you use that import library for different ActiveX objects?
It's anything on the machine. So if I go into import, anything that exposes an ActiveX interface.
Like we use that for like SQL developer or management or server. Sorry.
It depends what it exposes. So, Excel exposes a rich object model to actually like open a workbook and do stuff. Not every application does that. A lot of applications don't give you that access. We have commands for reading data from a database separate from that. So if you just want to read test data, you don't necessarily need this. This is more, but if there's any limitations with our, you want to do something specific in an application and it exposes it, like for example, MS Access does have a COM interface like this, and so MS Access will be another really good example of an application you could use this with. I don't know if SQL Management Studio exposes a runtime API, for example. It might do. I have it installed, so SQL Server. I don't see it. MS, maybe it's under MS SQL, Microsoft. It could be. I'm not seeing it offhand. So basically, yeah, anything on the machine that's available then provides an ActiveX interface or a .NET interface. So you could even import a managed DLL too. So if you have a managed DLL, like some kind of runtime, we have some samples here. Hold on, I need to be in the samples folder, documents. Oh, I need to be in, hold on, see users, public, old public documents, Rapise, samples, and there's a managed DLL, which is a .NET compiled DLL. You can go in, if it's in here, like that, and then you can actually import that as well, like that. So that's another option. And there's your references in right here. So it actually gives you an XML version too. So you can see the references to the commands you have. And so, for example, that was just a .NET application I installed. You could go in here and say, oh, I gotta create it, but yeah, var test equals new ActiveX object. I guess it was, hold on. Oh, test library. Or not, let's have a look. Test library DLL, typist, type.calculator. Yeah, you know what, let me look at the sample. So using managed. I don't remember the name of that DLL. With the ActiveX ones, it's a little bit easier because the name is automated. With the managed ones, it's basically a slightly different syntax because it's not actually not ActiveX. That's right. You do this, so it's slightly different, but like that. You basically do this, and that gives you access to the test library.calculator, which is the DLL I just linked to. So it is a little bit different if you're using managed, like a .NET compiled DLL in an assembly, or if it's ActiveX. But we do have the samples that come with the system. So one is the managed sample. That's for anything compiled in .NET using the .NET runtime. Unmanaged is anything ActiveX that's not managed code. And in either case, you can basically automate. So that lets you automate things at a much more deep level than just launching it. Any questions on that? Does that make sense? Okay, and let's go back to X. And so we've kind of talked about the debugger, the variables, the ActiveX. I mean, there's things in the code view that just sort of I take for granted, but there's folding where you can actually fold a function down, which is nice. There's the code completion I already mentioned, and there's the color highlighting. So there's lots of things in the editor to make it good. There's also the drag and drop. So if you drag and drop something, like for example, this two dialogues, it creates the statement for you. If you have a log file, it will do the same thing, a batch file. So you can just drag things from here, and it will generally know what to do with it. In that, not necessarily in that one, XML, but exes, batch files, text files. If you go in here, for example, and I create a spreadsheet, here, go, add, create a spreadsheet. My test data, like that. That's good. I can actually have an inline test case. Test data, this is not RVL, this is just simply data, which you can then use with the spreadsheet object. You've got a built-in spreadsheet editor. I think when you want to do it, use it in your test, you can just drag it across and it builds the attached statement. Again, you still got to write the loop to go through it, but the idea is if you drag things from that left-hand navigation bar into the code view, the system will attempt to determine from the file type what it should do with it. Another thing that's useful is if you had a script file, so if I have another script, another JS file I want to run, I can even drag that over, and it actually adds the command to include a JS file. And that would include another JS file if I wanted to use the libraries that are in it. If I wanted to launch another Rapise file, I can even drag that over as well. I can, for example, create a subtest, my subtest. And if I want to launch my subtest, I can drag that over here, and it creates a do invoke. So that's my main test calling my subtest. But again, once you add that file in, it knows what to do with things. So when you drag a JS file, it basically knows to include it as a library. If you add an SS test file, it knows to attempt to invoke the test. And if you go into scripts and drag one of these over, it will do the same thing. It creates a include file, same as the objects. So those are some useful things around dragging things from the object view and the file view into the test. If you drag it from the file view, it creates the appropriate utility command to launch, open, invoke. And if you drag things from the object tree, it knows to basically add the function. So if I wanted to open a file from the file, for example, I could go here and say, does the file exist? Or I could just go in here and say, drag that across, file exists, C:, my file.txt. So there's lots of helper functions in Rapise to try and make it easier. Obviously the help is available, and if you do get stuck, like what is the syntax of this exists, hit F1, it opens up the help file, and we'll find the command for you. So there's definitely ways to get help from within the code, just hit F1. But in addition to that, we do try and help you by giving drag and drop and Intellisense / code completion wherever we can. So, okay, that's kind of an overview of a lot of the JavaScript editing features. Is there anything else? We can do a little bit of the Selenium, but are there any other questions around the code completion, the JavaScript, that sort of thing that I could help with?
So I have a question. Like you copied the exe file to your local your text folder and you dragged it, right? So instead of that, I can give the path.
Uh,
You can give the path into the codes, right?
so let's have a look. So the question, let me show you answer the question. The question was, if I have a text file and I drag it, what does it do, and does it open it? Is that the question?
No. So you copy copy the exe file to your test project, like test project, and you drag it, right? Instead of copying it to your project folder, I can use that in the
Oh, I
Parameterising.
see. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Oh, because yes, I'm with you. I copied into my Rapise tests. I copied. The question is, if you copy, I copied the exe right here. Let's say I didn't copy exe right here, but let's say if I drag it from somewhere else. Let's say I want to run the calculator, for example. So C program files. What have I got? I don't know what we got here. Let's have a look. I forget what calculator is. Windows, is it? Is it calc? They keep moving things. Maybe it's System 32. Let's see if I can find an app quickly. Calc. Calc. Oh, come on. There it is, calc. So let's say we want to learn calculator. If I drag that over to Rapise, what does it do? Oh, hold on, I've got to get off. Sorry, I was not select something. So let me do it again. Yeah, actually, you can't drag it from here. So what you would need to do, I forget, you drag it from here to here. So I forgot. First thing you have to do is two stages. First, you add the file, and that's not actually adding it physically. That's just a link to it. So we add a. So if I go in here, calc.exe, that adds a reference to it. It's just rare, and then I can drag it over here. No, but beware. What it's doing, it does it relative to your working directory. So if you look at that and go, my folder structure is different to someone else's machine, you might decide that that's a better decision. On the other hand, for some cases, this is obviously a system file. If it was relative to your folder, like a subfolder of your subfolder or a parent folder of a parent folder of where your tests are, then this working directory relative is better. So depending on where the file is and where your test files are, you might decide that a relative path like this one or an absolute path is better. So it just depends, and you can drag and drop it. Any other questions on the JavaScript editing, debugging, code completion, that sort of thing?
Real quick, on the eval file include, where you include my subtest one.
Yes. Yep.
When including other files or functions, is there a way to include everything within a folder, or do you need to add them one by one?
I believe you have to do it one by one. Each file, like if you have utility functions, I don't think there's a multi. I can check. Let's have a look. File dot includes code from a file. Include once, includes code from a file if it was not included earlier. So the include once is slightly safer because it will basically only include the file if it hasn't already been included. So if you have an include of an include and they both include some common, you don't want that same thing included twice because it might conflict. So include once does it once, but both of the two versions only include a single file. Now, if you wanted to do what you're describing, it's not that hard. All you would do is do a loop to get all the folders. You can write a utility function to do that. So, for example, in the object tree, we have the file option, and you can do things like open folder and get all the files in a folder and then loop, for example. So let me just do F1. Get the information about a folder, and then you actually want to get file, create folder. Folder exists, and then you want to get a list. Give me a second. I'm not as familiar with this. I have to double check. Finds the file in test folders. Oh, okay. That's the one, I think. Resolve. Got a touch. I might need to check on this for you. So let me take an action. I don't remember offhand. I believe there's a command to get the list of files in a folder, but I'll need to double check which one it is. I don't remember offhand. But then you could loop through and do the same thing. But definitely the include only works on a single one.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next question.
Oh, actually, sorry, yeah, I'm right. Get folder info is the one because it gets the path subfolders and files. So, okay. And if you want, I can quickly show you that one. Let me just clean this all out, this junk, Basically, what you do is go file dot folder info C colon Windows system 32, and I could do basically var folder equals like that, and I'm going to hit debugger. So yeah, again showing on debugger, internal debugger, and yeah, hit play. And then I'm going to go into variables, and I'm going to go into test folder, undefined. Oh, step over. Object expected. Let me go back. C colon Windows. Oh, I know. It's the, if you're using backslashes, you've got to do it twice. If it's a forward slash, you can do it once. Let's do it again. All right, step over. There we go. And variables, test, folder, methods. So I'm going to make this a bit bigger for you. And there's all the files. There's 292,938 files, and you can then loop through that collection and get all the files and then subfolders and wow, all that stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can access. It's basically a wrapper around the Windows file object.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. So another question I heard?
Yeah, so I noticed earlier that one of the options was, being able to create like a spreadsheet for data types and stuff like that. You can also think of JSON as well.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything like that for like a PowerShell script by chance, so that you can manage it within Rapise externally and then just calling it from Rapise?
You mean to like edit it?
Edit/manage.
I mean, you could, yeah. I mean, so manage is a. I mean, basically, it's not gonna. It's gonna run it through something else. So let me give some examples. The answer is that yes, I believe. The question is that, for example, let's just keep a simple one. Would be first of all, rather than being PowerShell, it would be test.bat. So a batch file first of all. Yeah, so if that's fine, and I'm going to basically go back to Rapise, and I'm going to close some of these down so I don't have to keep going back and forth. And I go back to my files. You always have to add it, reference to it first, and then you can do things with it in the code view. So temp something.bat with it, test.bat. Oh, there's JSON in fact, test.bat. And if you get the bat file and you drag it, it's gonna obviously let you run it, which is nice. Double click on it, you can edit it right here. CD, C colon Windows, blah blah blah. So it has an editor for. I mean, it's still running it through Windows. I mean, that's why I said you can manage it. It's stored in here. It'll get version control and Spyro just like every other file. You can edit it natively in the editor, but it's going to ultimately run through the standard command line. Rapise isn't running it. It's just calling the command line to CMD to run it. PowerShell. What's the extension of PowerShell? I forget offhand.
PS1.
What is it? PSL is it or
PS1.
like that?
Yep.
All right. Oh yeah, that's right. It's been a while. I haven't done it for a while. So let's see. I don't remember what it does, so it's a good question. Test. Okay. Let's see. If I double click on it, it externally opens it. So it externally opens it. So I don't believe we. So PowerShell. I mean, it'll load it in Notepad, but it doesn't have a native editor for PS1. Yeah. It's a good idea. I can ask someone for enhancement for that one. Sure. But basically, yeah, bat files it does have a native editor for. PS1 it does not. JSON I think it does. Let's have a look. Add file. Test.json. Yep, JSON is there, and XML, other things. So most text files it can edit. PS1 it just doesn't have a handler for that. We're at 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Central. Any last questions on the JavaScript editor?
We're good in the room here.
Okay, was this helpful? Did this meet? Did we went through some things I sort of brainstormed that I thought would be useful. We didn't get to selenium. You were right about that. I thought we would, but that's okay. There's more questions than I thought, which is good. But I mean, did we hit everything? Is there anything that's still kind of a mystery, or?
Um, this is Sam. Actually, I'd like to learn in the future how to write XML, like read the file XML and write to it.
Um, okay. I don't think we have anything special. We have a file text opener in that. If you go to file in the global object, we have a file object, so you can open a file and you can read and write to it. It doesn't have any built-in, at least not. I mean, it does internally, but not. It doesn't expose any built-in XML handling. So what you would need to do is you can do it. You'd have to just use the standard C# .NET basically library that behind the scenes, and activate it using the managed DLL handler, and we could do it that way. But we don't have any objects, built-in objects here that expose XML editing. So you can certainly do it using a .NET library, like the built-in XML document one that comes with Windows, and just call it using the util instantiate object. But that's the only way I can think of out of the box to do it. But we do have handlers for Excel and JSON. Okay, and obviously database too. Thanks for watching today's webinar. I hope it was helpful. If you'd like to see more videos on automated software testing, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Have a great day.